Welcome to Beyond the Pod, presented by SodaStick.com.
Brunette, he moves, Brunette back in, he scores! Minnesota has upset the Colorado Avalanche! Andrew Brunette, the game-winning goal!
Here are your hosts, the second greatest scorer in Gopher hockey history, Pat Micheletti, and the second greatest hockey analyst on this podcast, Brandon Mileski.
Hey, welcome to a live edition of Beyond the Pod, Friday night at 9 o'clock after the NHL Trade Deadline. I'm Brandon Mileski, Pat Micheletti, former Gopher great with me as well. And as always, Beyond the Pod is brought to you by SodaStick.com. Because it is a live episode of Beyond the Pod, you can give us a question, throw your comments our way. We'd be able to happy to answer those throughout the evening. Pat, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing well, Brandon. Good to see you. And what a day. What a day.
Yeah, it was, originally I talked to you about scheduling this on Friday night at 9. I think I talked to you like on Monday.
Right.
And thought, thinking, it'll be a pretty active day. Maybe the Wild are in it. Maybe they're not. But, there'll be enough going on. And then Tuesday came by and all a bunch of big moves were made on Tuesday. I think Patrick Kane just kind of started the dominoes moving forward. And I thought, man, Friday might be a little boring. Maybe we made a bad decision, but it definitely wasn't boring today, and especially for your Minnesota Wild.
Right. I mean, I call me shocked. I right at 2:00, right when the last trade was announced, and I saw John Klingberg going to Minnesota. I'm like, what? But I was pleasantly surprised, and I think the Wild fans will be very, very happy once they see him play.
Yeah, we didn't really have any other moves that I thought really wowed me. I think we thought Jordan Greenway could be traded. The other moves they made seemed to make sense. I'll be honest, the Klingberg one kind of came out of left field for me, Pat, right? Because we focused so much all year on, man, we need scoring. We need a center. Yep. We need a winger that can play with Boldy. Like, we kind of thought we're pretty established on the blue line. They have 7 defensemen that can play. You've got Brock Faber potentially coming after the University of Minnesota season's over. So, the thought of getting a defenseman never really came into my mind. I also thought, frankly, Pat, that Klingberg would not be that cheap. I thought you were gonna have to give a first-round pick, maybe second-round pick for him, and a second-round plus. And to not only get him, but at the price they got him, I thought that was a pretty darn good deal for Bill Guerin.
Okay, let's start with Klingberg. Dallas did not want to get rid of him. They just couldn't afford him, and so he signs a 1-year deal with Anaheim. Anaheim thinking, you know what? We're gonna get a good return for him. Didn't pan out. I don't know if the market just dropped or whatever. But that being said, they were able to get the deal done and give up nothing. I mean, they give up nothing. And when you look at what they acquired, all of 4 guys, right? I think total 4. They paid nothing, and he did what he had to do. He was able to get good players in that didn't cost him anything, that have expiring contracts. So I think it was a home run. How it's going to turn out, we don't know. Who knows, right? But there's an upgrade on the forward position, 100%. And I'll tell you why I think that is. All of a sudden you have skill players. A lot of people don't like Johansson. I like Johansson. And I'll tell you why. I like him because he's got speed. He can handle the puck. He's smart. He's played in the playoffs before. And he's got a lot of experience. Nyquist, he's kind of the X factor, right?
Yes.
Is he going to play or not play? It didn't cost him anything. If he does play, I'm not going to say, a lot of people say he can really shoot the puck. There's a difference. They can all shoot the puck, first of all, Brandon. You know that with all the equipment, technology. They can all shoot the puck. But are you a good shooter? He's a good shooter. He's a creative guy also. So from that standpoint, and if you look at what the Wild have done, I don't know how they're 8-1-2 in their last 11. No clue. The only line that has given them any sort of offense or even chances is the top line. The other three, here and there, but nothing on a consistent basis. If you watched Johansson last night, there were 3 or 4 really good plays he made, and he opened things up a little bit. I don't know where that's going to go, but I like what has happened with this team.
You mentioned how they didn't really give up a lot, right? And
right.
First off, before they even acquired anybody, they had gained a 4th round pick and a 5th round pick, just being the banker, just being the middleman on the Patrick Kane trade, or no, the Ryan O'Reilly trade,
right,
and the Orlov trade. So the 5th rounder they used in the Orlov trade, they used that on Nyquist. So Nyquist is literally free. You didn't give up anything for him. And sure, he might not play until the playoffs, or even if he does, you don't know what you're going to get, right? The guy's been hurt. You don't know if he's 100%. You don't know, how quickly he can integrate himself onto a line and with this team. He was free, and he does have, some high reward to him. The Johansson, you gave up a 3rd round pick for him, but like I said, you got a 4th round pick in the O'Reilly thing. So basically just moved back 1 round to pick him up. Klingberg was a 4th, a minor leaguer that's never going to be a player here, and a prospect who's lower compared to the amount of healthy
I didn't see him on the list.
Yeah.
I didn't know who he was.
He's not high on your prospect list and probably never was going to be able to crack this lineup anyway. So you basically, gave up nothing for a rental in Klingberg. And then, you send out Greenway for a 2nd and 5th, and I can't believe they got a 2nd and 5th for him, given they drafted him in the 2nd round, and the guy's got 1 goal that wasn't on an empty net all season long.
Right.
And we'll get to that in a second. And then the 4th round for Lundqvist. So they basically did all this. They cleared cap space with Greenway, $3 million off the books next year, $3 million off the books in 2025. That, they're not going to be super flexible, but it helps a little bit.
Yep.
To me, it made sense for the future. It makes sense for now. Clearly they still have to do it on the ice, and we'll wait and see how that all happens. But I think it was a pretty darn good trade deadline by Bill Guerin and his crew.
Well, so do I. I mean, they've watched this team all year, and they've had pretty much the same guys, right? And I don't want to be, and I'm not being critical about Shaw, Duhaime, Dewar, Goudreau. I shouldn't put Goudreau in there, but Goudreau hasn't scored either. Guys like that. So what they did is, in essence, they got experience, they got skill. They obtain a guy that we haven't talked about yet in Sundqvist. And my first call today was to my brother Joe, who has seen him a lot because he was out east in Pittsburgh and then with St. Louis. I said, tell me about him. Well, here's what you're going to get out of Sundqvist. He likes Sundqvist, by the way. He's a big fan of his.
Yeah.
Not a great skater relative to the speedsters. Big, gritty, smart, experienced, knows how to play in the playoffs. He's won 2 cups. And people don't, I don't know. I don't, people understand the playoffs, but they don't understand the playoffs and what it takes to play in the playoffs. And to me, going in with the same lineup that they had, I don't think that collection that I mentioned would be ready to handle it. Now, some are going to play, some are going to stay in the lineup. Not all of them will. And it takes time to get to that point where you have the patience and the maturity and the know-how to get it done. So I think, I think those guys are still a little bit away from that. And I think Bill Guerin and the organization recognize that. That doesn't mean that they're done, they're gone. It's just that, you know what? We have an opportunity to do something in a West that's wide open, and we can get it done without mortgaging the future.
We are live, so we can take your questions and comments. This one comes from Jimmy Crackhorn. He says, I'm a big fan of Klingberg. How many minutes do you think Klingberg will play? And I want to talk about his entire role here, Pat.
Yeah.
And the trickle-down effect acquiring him has. He's always been a 20-plus minute guy. Yeah, I would imagine he's going to run your first power play unit, right? And that's going to have a big effect on Kalen Addison. And I think Kalen Addison probably is not going to see the lineup a whole lot.
Yeah,
because
and he's another guy. He's another guy.
The only reason Addison was in the lineup was because of the power play. Let's be honest.
Yep.
His 5-on-5 play wasn't going to keep him in. So I think Addison's going to be out of the lineup, and he'll be a healthy scratch unless there's injuries. Now, Jonas Brodin might be hurt bad, and we don't know exactly, but I have a feeling that might not be. So one, Klingberg kind of gives you Brodin insurance, and they're not the same player. But I'm saying in terms of a guy who can play 20 plus minutes, right? You might not be able to get that out of an Addison or even a Goligoski at this stage of his career.
Yep.
So completely different players, but both top 4-ish type players. But I would imagine he's going to run your power play. And if Brodin's healthy, put the two of them together, and you got a defensive Brodin, and we'll let Klingberg be a little bit more aggressive offensively. And I kind of imagine that's the role he's going to have and the effect that's going to have on that blue line.
Yeah, I agree. And one little added value with Klingberg, people think of him, we're getting a power play guy, power play specialist. He's not afraid. He's a bigger guy, and I'll bring you back to the first. They played Calgary, right? First 90 seconds of game 1, who's he fight? Matthew Tkachuk. Not that he's a fighter, but he's not. My point is, he's not afraid. He'll throw his body around a little bit, and he'll get involved. So you're not just getting this, oh my God, all he is a power play guy. He's more than that. He's more than that.
Well, and also, I know you don't have 3-on-3 overtime once you get to the playoffs, but for the rest of the regular season, he should be your top defenseman in those situations and add offensively. We saw it many times back when he was with Dallas, playing 3-on-3 overtime against the Wild. The other part is, Pat, and they mentioned it today, and I think this is kind of a criticism of Kalen Addison. Klingbergs can produce offensively 5-on-5 as well. He's a great power play producer, but he can score a 5-on-5, which was really a failure for Kalen Addison. Everyone focused on Addison's defensive deficiencies, and he had some, but he really wasn't a 5-on-5 offensive player for you. He was kind of just strictly a power play specialist.
Right. And remember last year with the, they like to cycle on top and really get moving around, and the D were part of that. I don't want to say non-existent this year, but not as much movement from the D. He is not afraid to get things going, right? He'll jump up in the offensive zone. That's all a part of, getting used to playing with the players that he's with, but he's that type of guy, and he's a really good skater. Recovers quickly, and I'm anxious to see him play.
Let's go to the Jordan Greenway discussion. Pat, we have talked about him. He's been a polarizing player here for quite some time. Pretty disappointing season and a disappointing end to his career, because he kind of seemed to be getting it a little bit the previous 2 seasons. That line with Joel Eriksson Ek and Marcus Foligno was so good, and he's always been a little bit of a tease in terms of his size and a guy who has that, not that he's an elite skill player, but the skill in comparison to his size. You thought you could get a lot out of him someday, and to see the season he's had, and maybe getting traded will spark him a little bit, and going back to an old coach he's had previously in Granato might spark him and someone who can get to him. But he just seems like a guy who's not super inspired, in my opinion.
Yeah, he needs to be on a strict regimen of constant babysitting. And I think, remember, he started the season, he was hurt, and then he couldn't get in a rhythm. And there were games, okay, we need to see more of this. But I don't think he ever got into it. And I think he knew, kind of maybe in the back of his mind too, that, I'm a commodity. I'm big, I'm strong, I can skate, I can somewhat handle the puck, and every GM, every coach thinks, if I get him, I can do it. Hence, Minnesota was delayed in making a move with them because they were waiting. They were waiting for that consistency to start, for him not to get 20 goals, but to produce a little bit more and to be a pain in the what, and it was too up and down, and some nights you didn't know, you just didn't know, and it was painfully obvious.
ABC123Z asks, what players will be in the press box with these new additions? I have to imagine, Sam Steele's been in the press box for quite some time, and this is just going to put him even lower down the list. But you kind of mentioned earlier, maybe some of those fourth line guys like Shaw and a Dewar. They've been, Dewar specifically has been in the lineup consistently. Shaw's been a little in and out. I guess depending on your matchup in the playoffs, Reeves is a guy that could see the press box. And and part of it is we don't know whether Nyquist, when he'll be available and what his health will be. But I have to imagine those guys, and as we mentioned earlier, Kalen Addison.
Yeah, and Duhaime is going to be in that mix too. I mean, I see a Freddie Gaudreau dropping down as low as the fourth line, where I think he should be anyway. I think the playoffs were too tough for him last year. It was a different game in the playoffs, and that line, Boldy, Fiala, and Gaudreau were not good. I mean, they were putrid in the playoffs. And if you only have one guy or one line going, that's not going to work. You're not going to win. And hence they didn't. Not blaming it all on them, but the physicality of playing up the middle and controlling the middle of the ice. I think they're going to give Sundqvist a shot at that third line center. I think they'll be pretty rugged up the middle. When you have Ek and Hartman plays that type of game, and so does Sundqvist. So, and trust me, I think Gaudreau would be perfect for the fourth line. He's smart enough. They're not, he's defensively aware, and they add a little speed on the wings there. That's how I see it going, but you never know. There's still 18 games left, and a lot of things could happen. But they'll tinker, they'll look, and again, the big mystery will be Nyquist.
Yeah, Gaudreau is one of those players that I think has not been in the right spot slotted in the lineup, just based off of the way your lineup is constructed. I think fans have been loving on him lately because he's been, coming up with big shootout goals and
guess what?
And putting points in the standings for you. But ultimately, he shouldn't be in a top six role. He really shouldn't be in a middle six role. He should be a bottom six center / winger, and I would like him in that role.
Yeah,
right?
Me too.
I always go back to the Twins. Like Nick Punto was a really good utility player for the Twins.
Yep, one of the best.
I remember there was a year in which all of a sudden he was your starting third baseman, and he couldn't produce as a starting third baseman. And people are like, "Oh, Nick Punto's the worst." It's like, no, he's not. He's a fine baseball player. He should just be your utility guy who fills in and subs and can play multiple positions. That's his strength. He shouldn't be your starting third baseman. And I kind of look at Gaudreau like that. Now, he kind of got away with it last year because he had two pretty darn good wingers with him in Boldy and Fiala. But you kind of see when one of those guys is taken off that Gaudreau is not capable of driving a line. He can be a third piece if you have two really good players. They don't have the two really good players anymore. But if you put him in a fourth line role where he's killing penalties for you, taking draws, I'm fine with him there.
Yeah, and can we talk about, I read a lot lately. Bring up Boldy, or bring up Rossi, Beckman, and Walker, and da 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 da. And I try to take a deep breath, and the if they were ready to play in a top six role in a playoff situation, they would be here, and Bill Guerin would make those moves. But you just don't understand how hard it is. Look at Boldy now and his struggles as of late, right? And he's only 21 years old. We expect more because he's a really, really good player, and he's going to be a superstar. But for any of us to expect Boldy to drive a line, carry a line, I think that's a little bit silly, to be quite honest. And that's why you make the deals that you do with the Johansson, with the Nyquist, with the Sundqvist, to get those experienced guys who've been around, who know how to play, who are mature, who are men. And, again, who knows how it's going to play out, but I like the moves right now.
Lori Jones asks, are you concerned that Klingberg's defensive play is awful while playing with the Ducks? I want to get to this because I had a lot of people in my timeline on Twitter today, Pat.
Me too.
Concerned about the minus 28 with Anaheim.
Yep.
And one, John Klingberg is not a great defensive player, but he's good enough offensively that can usually overcome the defensive shortcomings.
And he's not horrible defensively either.
No.
But go ahead. I'll let you finish.
I was just going to say, and I joked about it on Twitter, but it's also serious. It's also true. If you are a plus on the Anaheim Ducks this year, you're not playing a lot, right?
Right.
It's a bad team that's losing a lot of games. And when you are on a bad team, the guys who play the most are going to have the most minuses because you're on the ice the most and you're being put in tough situations. And, he was a bad minus his last 2 seasons in Dallas as well. But I'll say a couple things here. One, this is a guy who was 6th in the Norris voting twice earlier on in his career, was top 5 for Calder, has been in the Stanley Cup final a couple seasons ago with Dallas. And if Jonas Brodin is healthy, let's say Jonas Brodin's healthy and John Klingberg is playing with Jonas Brodin, you think he's still going to be on a minus 28 pace here? No, he's going to be better supported here with better goaltending, better defensive play, better defensive structure, in a winning environment where you're motivated. This guy's playing for a contract as well, by the way. He's a free agent after the year. He thought he was going to get paid last year and just got the 1-year, $7 million. He did the prove it deal in Anaheim. The guy is going to be motivated. He's going to have a great structure around him. Not saying he's going to be perfect defensively, but I'm really not that concerned about it.
I couldn't have said it any better. And so I will not say anything other than I agree with you 100% because it's going to be, he's coming to a different team with a different structure and a more of a defensive mindset, defense first type thing. And, you pair him with Brodin. Oh boy, I think that'd be pretty good, but yeah, let's see how it plays out. Let's see if he makes egregious mistakes, like Addison was making, and, then make our determination.
All right, before we continue, Pat, I want to let our listeners and our viewers tonight that are watching live know about our sponsor on Beyond the Pod, SodaStick.com. Get your original Minnesota sports inspired goods at SodaStick.com. If you haven't seen the stuff yet, you got to check it out. All their apparel screen printed here in Minnesota on super soft, super comfy shirts. You'll love it. We're going to hook you up with 15% off your next order. So use the code KFAN for 15% off. That is SodaStick.com, original Minnesota sports inspired goods. Use the code KFAN for 15% off. I just saw recently they have a super cool Minnesota Timberwolves sweatshirt with a really cool logo that they just released. Let's go to Craig G. Service, who says, with these additions today, do we have to send anyone down to Iowa once Broads and Moose return? He said, I seen Murmis was sent down today. Yeah, I think they have like 4 emergency moves now with Iowa.
Yep. But they don't have to send anyone down. They can keep extra people up
because of their cap space.
Yeah. I don't know what the exact rule is, and probably because of that also.
Alex Micheletti, one of the most respected opinions on Twitter, especially out of all the people with the Micheletti name. He says Klingberg, Brodin pairing, all for it. I would have to imagine. Let's talk about how they would pair things here, Pat.
Yeah.
Matt Dumba is here. That's a name that we thought maybe was going to be sent away before this trade deadline. I'm assuming you're going to keep Spurgeon and Middleton together because Spurgeon has been great for Middleton's game and vice versa.
Yep.
Brodin, if healthy, and like I said, that's a question mark moving forward. But Brodin with healthy, I would imagine you'd have Klingberg playing top 4 minutes. So I think Dumba would get moved down to your third pairing, and Merrill would play, and Goligoski and Addison would be on the bench or up in the press box, I should say, unless there's an injury. I guess the interesting one here, though, too, is Pat, is I kind of thought we all assumed maybe Brock Faber would be a guy you could put potentially right into your lineup after his season's over at the University of Minnesota. Given you have 8 defensemen, if all healthy, I don't think we're going to see much of Brock Faber this year.
I will put it like this, Brandon. I think they're thinking in the now and what they have to do to get into the playoffs and make the playoffs, and not expect Faber until the 15th of April. And he'll sign that night, and he'll come and he'll practice. And depending upon where they are, how guys are playing, yeah, all those factors. And if they need them, I think they'll use them. And if they don't have to burn that year, all the better. So I think it's just more of a, yes, we're going to sign him. Yes, he'll be here. And whether he plays or not, is to be determined.
Diesel Fueler wants to ask, is Ek the second or third most valuable forward on this team right now, or am I nuts?
Well, and it all
top
depends.
Top four, definitely, I guess, depending on how you view Zuccarello and Boldy.
Yeah, Zuccarello, Boldy, Kaprizov, and Ek, right? I mean, he's a major part of it.
There's a big teardrop after that.
He's a disturber. He's having a good year offensively. Not I mean, he's not, we got to get him out on the ice to score. But you know what? He's a really good player. Really good player. Yeah. And yeah, I would put him in there.
It's sad to see his line mates fall apart this year, because this was a team last year, Pat, that had 3 strong lines, and that is, and you knew the one line was going to drop off and regress without Fiala. I guess I could have predicted maybe Foligno and Greenway wouldn't be as great as they have been the last year or two, but I didn't see the drop off.
Yeah. And I wonder how hurt Foligno is. And we never know those injuries. It just seems like he's, kind of labored for a while. And, last year, how many times did we see him take it hard to the net? And
he hasn't been as physical.
No. And so, I don't know. Listen, I know that whenever he's out there, he's trying his hardest. He's a great teammate and a great guy. And I hope he gets somewhat healthy by playoff time.
Andrew Ball says, I don't know the NHL very well outside of the local squad, but how fortunate are we to have Billy G as our GM? How do you feel the national media feels about the job he has done?
I think he's Harry Houdini with what he did. To not mortgage anything and get the assets that you got today. I don't know. Here's one thing, Brandon. I think we all know this by now. Whatever money he has, he's going to make the most of it. And losing is not in his DNA, in terms of his attitude. And his goal is, you know what, we're going to do everything we can to advance, win the cup, whatever, however you want to play it. There's no, let's not do this because we got next year. He's in the here and now. And I love that about him. And again, he's doing things we haven't seen other general managers in the past do here. And so I think he's done
and he's aggressive. He gets up to the plate and he swings the bat, Pat. I mean, he doesn't leave the bat on his shoulder.
He cares about his players, but you know what? When it's time to do business, he's got one thing in mind. How can I help my team win?
Yeah, and he helped them get better, and we'll see it on the ice. There's no guarantees, but I thought the team got better, and they really didn't mortgage the future. In fact, shed salary in the future, and still have all their prospects, all their top draft picks.
Yep.
I'm telling you, once these Parise Suter things are done in 2 years, this team is set up. There's going to be a window there. You're going to have Kaprizov in your prime. A bunch of prospects that'll be 2 years older in a good prospect system can play for cheap. They'll have money to be able to go out and either resign, and obviously Kaprizov's going to get another huge raise. Let's be honest.
Yep.
His money's going to go up, but they're going to have money to do it. They're going to have money to go out and get players in free agency. I think it's going to be a place other players will want to come to. This team is set up here a couple of years from now if we can just be patient for it. And frankly, Pat, do I think this is the best Minnesota Wild team I've ever seen? No, but it looks like a wide open Western Conference. The Wild.
I was going to ask you.
How many teams are falling apart in the West with Calgary and Winnipeg? Dallas has slipped a little bit.
Literally, if I were to ask you, who do you want to stay away from in the West? Who would
Colorado.
But even Colorado. Okay?
Colorado if healthy.
But they don't have a second line. When JT Compher is your second line center.
Either do we, Pat. Either we don't have a second line either.
Yeah, I get that. Okay. They have McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog. How healthy is he
Makar.
going to be? Right? Makar, how healthy is he going to be? Gorgiev, never played in the playoffs before. How's that going to affect him? Eric Johnson is a key piece to their decor. He is out. I don't know if he'll be back, but remember 2 years ago when he was out, they were a mess in the playoffs without him. He gets back in the lineup last year, was a major cog for that team on the defensive side of the puck, and just a solid guy. They're going to miss him. So, yeah, if there's one team that you'd say, okay, we better be ready. I don't see them getting blown out by anybody. Okay, and there's not really anybody. If I were to pick a winner in the West right now, it'd be the Edmonton Oilers. But then I say, well, what do you do? What are you saying that for, Pat? Because they have issues in goal. Skinner, never heard of the guy, really, and he's their number one guy now. Yep. So every team has warts.
Yes, in the West.
And so who can come out of there?
And a lot of the activity at the trade deadline was going out east.
Yes,
Patrick Kane and Ryan O'Reilly,
Timo Meier.
Well,
how about they're not going to make the playoffs? But
how about what I tweeted earlier today? And I was just curious after the Wild had gone 7-0-1 in their last 8. I'm like, how does this team, even though it feels so different than last year's team, compare? And the Wild through 62 games last year were 38-20-4 for 80 points. The Wild right now through 62 games this year, 35-21-6, 76 points. So even though this team feels completely different than last year's team, and they're only 4 points behind last year's team at this pace. Now, the goal differential is much different and the offense is much different. But, as much of a struggle as it has been to watch anyone other than Kirill Kaprizov try to put the puck in the net this season, defensively, and goaltending-wise, they're much better. Power play is much better. Penalty kill is much better. They are a lot better in many elements this year than they are from last year's team.
And what the biggest reason why they are where they are is their attitude. Their attitude. They could have, when they went in that slump, they could have stayed there. But they never, even last year when they had slumps, I think their leadership and their belief that they can win, that they are good enough. I don't think they when they lose a game, it's like, oh my God, what are we doing out on the ice with this team? We'll never beat them. It's like, okay, let's get back at it tomorrow night. Let's get back to the way we play. And they've had that attitude, and they don't let it last a long time. They sure, a 2-week stretch, not good or whatever, but they bounce back. And that the resiliency of the team, I think, has been really impressive.
All right, I'm trying to find a comment or a question I had earlier, but I cannot find it in here. But it was basically a joke about the here it is. R. Sonnenson Outdoor says, do you think Gus has played good enough for Billy G to start him game 4 of the playoffs? Obviously being funny, but I mean that we're gonna run into the same situation.
Yeah, we are.
And I don't think last year I thought it was overblown. I thought both goalies were playing well going into the postseason, and I thought whatever decision you made, they were both playing well, and it was kind of you couldn't lose with whatever choice you made. I would have gone with Marc-Andre Fleury like the coaching staff did, just based off his pedigree. The guy's been a winner in the postseason before. It can handle the pressure of the playoffs. And I don't think starting Fleury was the reason they lost, but everyone likes to focus on that. But That being said, and this isn't a shot at Fleury. When I say this, I think people think that it's me saying Fleury's bad, and it's not, because I think Fleury's been okay this season. But Gustafsson's been, unbelievable. He's statistically, he's the second best goalie in the National Hockey League this year. So assuming this keeps going here and sustains here for the next 20 games, which based off of the first 62 I've seen from Gustafsson, I think it will. Game 1 in the playoffs, I think you go with Gus.
Here's how I look at it. I think if we were to be a fly on the wall in their conversations about how they handled the goaltending situation in the playoffs last year, I think they would say we made a mistake. Not necessarily in who we started, it's how we started them. I think there was an opportunity at a time in the series that they needed to make a change, whether it be for one game, 2 games, whatever. And they missed that opportunity. They played Fleury again, then they lost. And then it was like, okay, now we're going to throw him in there. And the whole team's like, well, I don't. Conversely, the way Berube handled it, okay, they lose. Tell me, they won game 1, lost game 2, game 2, and then he made the switch.
Did he make the switch then or after game 3? Because the Wild were up 2-1.
Yeah.
So that's why like people were critical.
So it's when you do something and how it affects the psyche of the team and all of that. Back to Gustafsson. Yeah, I would start him game 1. And I don't know if they're going to keep switching the rest of the year or not. And, maybe they'll just keep that going. I don't know. I would start him game 1. They win game 1. You start him game 2. You win game 2. You start him game 3, whatever. And if he's playing well. So I quite frankly, I don't really care. Just stop the puck.
Well, and he's been doing it quite a bit this year. And another great Bill Guerin move, right? People thought the goaltending was, and myself included, goaltending was going to be the biggest question mark going into the season. And who would have thought back in the offseason that Philip Gustafsson, who just looked like a throw-in in the trade, just because you needed a backup goalie, would have the season he's had. It's been unbelievable.
I recall you and I having that discussion. Okay. Either you said to me or I said to you, okay, you got Fleury for 50. Okay. He's not going to win all 50. Okay, cut it down to 40, maybe cut it down to 35, maybe cut it down to 30 wins. All right. Where are you going to get the other wins? That's what we didn't know. From an unknown, a guy who didn't play very much, guy that played on a bad team, 24 years old. Is this guy going to be ready? We see him early in the year. Certainly wasn't ready. But after he got settled in here, a lot of people, he might be the best goalie in the league right now, right?
He's right up there.
Yeah.
Michael Carlson asks, who was the primary winner of the trade deadline, Pat?
Well, we'd have to go out east, right? And we'd have to put them all in a room and say, no, we won. No, we won. No, we won. New Jersey did awfully well. You get Timo Meier. The Rangers did awfully well.
That's who I was going to go with.
And Kane.
Yeah. They got the biggest fish.
Yep. Toronto.
And didn't give up a lot for him, Pat.
No. Toronto did fine. One sleeper that maybe didn't need even to make any deals, the Boston Bruins. They add grit with Hathaway, and they add a pretty good defenseman in Orlov. And that's a pretty solid move. And they added another piece. I can't recall who it was. But definitely, the Eastern teams, were the ones that loaded up.
Speaking of the East, Mark Long says, who do you have the Wild playing in the Stanley Cup?
That, what? That's a great question, because I could list all 8 teams that make the playoffs have a legitimate chance in the East to make it to the Stanley Cup. I would favor the New York Rangers just because of their depth. And I think Shesterkin is the second best goaltender in the world. I'm a little concerned on their back end. It's been banged up. Lindgren's been out. I don't know how much. I know Keandre Miller is a good player. I think he can get a little loose. So defensively, they scare me a little bit. But up front, they
got a goalie who can take over, though.
Yeah, they really do.
I think Carolina is still strong. And then even Diesel Fueler wants to ask, what's going on with the Bruins? How are they so good this year? They are having an unbelievable season. I don't even think maybe it's just because it's a hockey thing where people don't talk about hockey outside of the hockey community. They are not getting enough attention for how historic of a season they're having.
They have, and anybody you talk to and you ask them, or they ask you about Jim Montgomery, he's unbelievable as a coach. I was around him a lot when he was the head coach of Denver, and his attention to detail on everything, on every facet of the game, on every power play, on every penalty kill, on where you need to be. And it's crazy. And how hard he works his assistants, gives him a lot of responsibility, I should say. And he's just a really, really good coach.
All right, Pat, I just want to thank everyone for watching and listening on this podcast in the future tonight for our live episode. And everyone, a lot of people stayed with us throughout the entire podcast.
Yeah,
so very much appreciate it. As always, before we end every podcast, Pat, it's time for our stick tap. Who would you like to give a stick tap to today?
Well, I'm giving it to the general manager, Harry Houdini, Bill Guerin. I think with what he did and without losing anything, again, who knows how it's going to turn out, but job well done.
I'm going to go 2 stick taps here, Pat. One, I know you are close with him. St. Cloud State head coach Brett Larson, he got his 100th career victory last weekend. Fastest coach in program history to 100, 19 games faster than Bob Motzko.
Unbelievable.
Pretty
Great
impressive
coach.
run from him. Secondly, I'm going to give a stick tap to the Mounds View Irondale Mite 2 Green team. I coached them this year. Pat, there's a lot of stigma attached to youth hockey these days, and in many cases, rightfully so.
Yep.
There's a lot that could be corrected and is not going right. But I'll tell you what, the combination of players, parents, and coaches I got to operate with this year was about as perfect as it could have been. It was such a fun season. The players were great. They all listened. They all tried their best. Parents were awesome. Didn't have an issue with one parent. And the coaches I got to work with were great as well. So just want to give a shout out to
that's awesome.
That entire group, because our season was over, ended last weekend, and I know not every season is going to be as fun as that one, but I had an absolute blast
Love
this year.
It's the best time ever. And I have one more shameless plug.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, 10 to noon, Beyond the Pond with the great Kevin Fallness taking over for you.
Great.
Kevin and I, and we have a great lineup. My brother Joe is going to join us. So we'll talk about the East. We'll have Bill Guerin on. We'll have my player of the year in the Big Ten, Jackson Lacombe on. So it's going to be a great show.
All right. Thank you, Pat. Appreciate it. Good luck with the show tomorrow. I'll talk to you later. He's Pat Micheletti. I'm Brandon Mileski. This has been another episode of Beyond the Pod. This one was live tonight. If you weren't able to catch all of this, you can always listen back to the podcast on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcast. You can also watch it on the KFN YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching and listening to Beyond the Pod. We'll talk to you next week right here on Beyond the Pod. Bye.